Avril, how
Yo,
are you? Are you well?
I'm well, Aidan. How are you doing?
I'm in great form, thank God. I'd just like to start by welcoming everybody today to today's webinar, Conflict at Work. I said to Avril beforehand in the preamble that this resonates with me a little bit, and I'm sure the 63 or 68 odd that we've registered for this, it resonates with them as well. We'll be doing this live, so throughout this there will be toing and froing between everybody. We'll have questions, and at the same time as well there'll be people who will be able to avail of the replay of this afterwards. So we may not be famous now, but we might be famous later on. I'd like to start to say hello and welcome to everybody for joining us. We're just going to have a little bit of a wait for about 2 or 3 minutes until we can gather all and any stragglers that we have about, or if people are making a last minute cup of tea or whatever. I just want to make sure that everyone's okay. With regards to conflict at work, what is the most prevalent aspect of that you would say, just to have a little talk about it at the start before we get live? Like, is there one main contact? Is there one main issue that you think that sort of runs through all the experience that you've had with regards to conflict at work, Avril?
Such a good question. I'm reminded my nephew is doing a project this week on Ireland's culture. And I loop that into what I think the biggest issue I feel in practice I see is that we have a fear of conflict. Like, and I know I don't speak for everybody, but speaking in relation to my base of experience, I see a lot of people who are actually afraid of it, understandably, and that leads to all sorts of problems further along the line that we've discussed today. So essentially, I think it's that essential that in the first instance, fear and avoidance. Fascinating.
I might have something to add to that later on as well, if I may.
Good. I hope so. You can add it now if you want.
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do, actually. We'll get this underway. I'll just get through a few bits of housekeeping that we need to get sorted first of all. So to start off, my name is Aidan Finucane. I'm part of the team here at TrainedIn, and we're absolutely delighted to be working with Taste for Success SkillNet on the Ignite program, putting a spark back into the hospitality, food and drink sector. Ignite is part 2 of this installment. It's been running since yesterday, January the 18th, and it's going to run again until the Friday, the 29th of January. So for the next 2 weeks, we've got roughly 4 episodes a day, diverse, various, and it'll give us the opportunity to turn those lockdown friends upside down for at least a couple of hours a day, where we've got people interacting and dealing with each other and engaging and connecting with each other as well, albeit on a screen. Something we're going to have to get used to, but not too used to. The most important thing about this program, brilliant in its concept, magnificent in its delivery, is open to all levels of management and frontline workers in any aspect of the hospitality, food and drink sector. To make it as successful as possible, we'd actually ask you to maybe share it with your friends, your family, your network, or anyone else you think may benefit from this, because it can be, sitting on our couch in our jammies is all very well and good. I did it in November, lockdown 2, but actually re-engaging and flicking those switches where we need to start learning and being a student again and welcoming different kinds of knowledge is absolutely vital for getting ourselves through this spiritually and as well as mentally. Now, we can't see or hear you. Myself or Avril can't see or hear you. So the chat function just there on the right-hand side of the control panel is going to be our interface with each other. It's going to be vital. Avril said earlier on that she's going to be talking a lot about her subject, of course, but it can also be an attendee-led kind of an episode. There obviously, we all have massive experience walking around the earth, dealing with other people and customers and colleagues alike. There are points of friction, and being shown how to deal with these and manage these is absolutely vital, as well as the effective communication. So use the chat. Anything that you guys need to do, need to comment on, or any observations that you have or experiences you'd like to share, please interact with us through the chat. Also, as well, because we can't see you and hear you, that privacy is there for you as well. You can also use that at the bottom right-hand corner. You can switch to send message to admin, which means I'll only get it, or Avril will only get it, and we can keep that aspect private, but we'll still deal with the question either during, in the middle of it, or at the end, where we might have a little bit of a Q&A. Is there anything else? No, I'm going to put the Taste for Success learner profile into the chat now. I would ask you that everyone please fill that out. You only need to fill it out once for any of the courses that we will be doing for the next 2 weeks, but please do fill it out. Anything else? Just after that, I will put another, the timetable link, the digital timetable link, so you can look through what we have going on in the next couple of weeks. Hover over it, book any more sessions, or register for any more sessions that you want. I think that's it. I think that's me and my housekeeping done, Avril. I'm going to turn off my mic. I'm going to turn off the camera, and I'm going to leave you to your audience. And I wish you the best of luck. I'll be paying close attention.
Aidan, thanks a million. Wow, what a professional introduction. I feel like I'm on Today FM or something. He's a natural, guys, isn't he? Absolutely. I can see why he's part of the team. So thanks to Aidan, obviously, as I said, super professional intro. And Bridget in the background, who organises everything. We have a fellow Tipperary link in common. My dad's in Tipperary. Say hi to my granddaughter who's there today. And also Serica, obviously, the whole brainchild behind the TrainedIn approach. So this is fantastic, right? So this is a great use of your time today. And I know what it's like to be at home. I'm at home right now, and I'm hoping that I'm waiting on a DUNS delivery, as we all are. And I'm hoping it doesn't land halfway through, and it probably will, you know, and that's absolutely grand if that happens. We'll deal with that too in terms of conflict. So as Aidan said, I'm really happy to, and this is so strange for me, I'm talking into my camera, but I'm really happy to get questions. So either directly through your name on the chat function, questions or comments or whatever, statements. And the other thing is that obviously, as Aidan has said, there's an opportunity to do that, from a private perspective as well, because this is a tough area too. So it's really good to interact with it, to ask things, to say things, you know, if something comes up, I know I can find it so hard to hold it in, and I have to say it. And if you're one of those people like me, just put it into the chat if you want to. So you're really welcome. Avril Mansworth is my name. My maiden name is Avril Quinn. Some people will know me as Avril Quinn, and others will know me as Avril Mansworth. My company is called Human Reasons, and our website is humanreasons.com. Our logo is there in the far background. I should have a bigger version of it, but I got it redone this year. So here's a closer up one here now. That's very relevant, right? I'm talking about conflict at work, and I renamed my business Human Reasons, as I believe to be a very clever play on the letters HR for human resources. So Human Reasons, and keeping that very much in mind, I suppose, as we think about conflict as well. So Aidan, for some reason I can't see the slides, but that's fine. I can use my own slides. I'm just hoping that the participants can.
Not at all. That's entirely my fault. I was hanging on your every word, and I missed my cue.
There's no fault. Yeah, that's cool. That's totally cool. So look, yeah, brilliant. So conflict at work. And of course, I have to say that conflict at work now is in our own homes, because most of us are working from home. So it's all, look, it's like a jigsaw, as we all know, where like this Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk, says, we're all interconnected, and we are all absolutely interconnected, even though sometimes we might feel like being Madagascar and separate out, and I can feel like that. We are all interconnected. So conflict at work, I'm going to be kind of walking us through the who, the why, and what now. And this is very much anchored on an approach that I delivered late last year. So it's quite similar. So we might have people who were at that webinar last year, but as far as I understand it, today we have a largely new audience. And our audience today, again, as I understand it, are primarily coming from the hospitality sector, some of the bravest souls in the land. And as you can tell, I have a Cork accent. I live in Cove with my husband and sons. But from a Cork perspective, I do a lot of work with the hospitality sector. And I'm lucky because I get to go in, you know, help out and then leave again. It is a very tough space to be in at the moment. From a Cork perspective, again, a company that I would do a lot of work with are a fantastic organisation, Market Lane Restaurant Group. And for those of people who be aware of that brand, it's Market Lane, Elbow Lane, Castle Cafe, Orso and Goldie. They're a very, very successful Irish restaurant group, but they're going through it as well, of course, like we all are at the moment. So conflict at work is very, very timely. It's a very good investment of your time, as I said, just to think about it. And as Aidan said to me there, like, what is the most important thing, or what is the biggest thing you come across? And of course, like, there's no guarantees in life, but there's nearly one guarantee: where you've got human beings, you're going to come across conflict in some way. The other organisation that I want to mention today as well, in terms of my own business, because I'm working hard to keep my own business open at the moment as well, just like lots of people on the call are, is a company here, a local company called Great Island Media. And they're giving me a lot of support at the moment in terms of, you know, digital marketing and putting my business out there, because again, that's an entire skill that I wouldn't have really have known at all and still don't know much about. And I need that support at the moment. So we're all helping each other in relation to the current situation, without a shadow of a doubt. When I look at conflict and I think about it either myself in my own life, or when I'm called in to a company. So in my company, in Human Reasons, we have two different streams of services. So on one side, what we do is HR services for companies. And on the other side, it's career services for individuals and groups. So on one side, we can be, you know, interviewing on behalf of a company. And on the other side, we can be helping people to prepare for interviews. So we work on both sides. We work with the person, the candidate, the employee, but we also work with employers. So very often, somebody like me at Human Reasons, I get a phone call because something's gone wrong at work, let's say, from an employer. And, you know, something quite small might have escalated, and something, you know, as it typically does, it usually starts off, as we all know, something really micro, nano even, really small. But it can just, you know, it just has this ability to grow and grow and grow, and to go very, very quickly. You know, they say you can go from 0 to hero very fast, and it's just the same in conflict. You go from 0 to 100 very, very quickly. And I think we can all resonate with that. So I suppose I am training as a psychologist at the moment as well, and I have worked in HR for a long time. And because I have that experience, what I find, and I always speak in terms of my own experience, because I'm not an expert, but I can speak based on my own experience, as we all can. So based on my experience in terms of conflict at work, either as an employer or an employee, what I find really helpful is at the start, taking time to think, okay, about the who. Who is the person? So the person themselves that you're having conflict with, in terms of their background, their style, what's going on for them, but also the who in terms of you. Because the more we learn in the personal development space in relation to the world of work, and a lot of that space, as we know, hinges, as we also know, on what we call the interpersonal domain, which is all of our relational components, which is all the relational piece. So it's all the relating we do with other people, but also how we relate with ourselves. So we've got that kind of interpersonal piece where we're relating with others, but also we have that intrapersonal piece. Now, don't forget that you can make a comment, or you can ask a question or anything at any point in time. So we've got those kind of like that kind of bi-world happening at once. So those two worlds of the interpersonal with other people and the intrapersonal. And of course, as we interact interpersonally, we can interact at the same level in the organization. We can interact upward, downward, front, across with suppliers. There's a lot of what we call a 360-degree interaction. So it's like all the circle. So we're interacting constantly. So to link it back into conflict, it's always really useful for me to think about the who. Who is the person? What type of person are they? What type of person am I? And thinking about that person in more detail and paying more attention to it, okay? So basically, even if we think about it for a second, there's employers on today's call, but there's also employees. But for a second, we put the employer's hat on. So as an employer, they're looking for the who. They're looking at the start of what we call the talent life cycle. They're looking to build a team, either from the start, or they're looking to add to their team. So what do? They go to the employment market, they look and see who's looking for work, and they design a recruitment process, you know, with various checks and balances along the way. And then people apply for that process and they go through the process. So typically on the screen here, you know, as we know, with the CV comes in, you know, we take a look at the CV. And of course, in Human Reasons, we support people in having brilliant CVs and to get through these processes, you know, in the best way that represents them, and in the best way for the employer too. So you've got that CV pre-screen. So your CV is going to be like your bright, shiny representation of you. You're going to have those 2 pages and you're going to be talking about what you're brilliant at. You're not going to say, you know, my name is Avril and I hate conflict. I hope to God it never happens. You're going to say, my name is Avril, you know, I have my own business, I do this, all the things that you find that are really positive about you. That's what's going to be on your CV. And that's playing the game. And that's the way the world works. And that's absolutely fine. And you go through the process, right? So like with the recruitment process, hospitality is usually pretty quick. Usually it's a CV. Sometimes it's not a CV. Hospitality has got a huge experiential, pragmatic, practical component. So in my experience, what I've seen is a lot of hospitality will, you know, a job process, an interview, a recruitment process will invariably involve some form of trial. So like a trial shift or a trial couple of hours, how did it go? And sometimes it might be longer than that, depending on the seniority of the position. There might be a trial week, for example, and you know, usually that will be paid if it's a long period of time, you know, whatever it is. So the employer has this golden opportunity to see you in action. Again, you in action, you're going to be on your best behavior. You're not going to be, you know, talking about, oh, this is all crap in my life and I hate this. You're going to be showing up, as they say, fake it till you make it. You're going to put your show face on and you're going to represent yourself, as all humans do. Social desirability. We have like this phenomenon called social desirability. We want to be portrayed positively, socially. You know, we're mammals, and every time we forget that we've got this kind of social leniency, we get in trouble. So even if you don't feel social, we have all this kind of like stuff in us that just drives us to be social and to be liked from a social perspective. So in that trial shift again, you're going to be, you know, your game face on, you're going to be doing the best of the best. But what we see then is that, look, again, at the moment, we have our employer hat on and we are talking about conflict. Someone comes into the company, you know, brilliant CV, they get through the trial shift, but invariably something goes wrong at some stage. It can go wrong in the first couple of weeks, the first couple of months, but it will. As we know, as humans, the shit will hit the fan at some point in time, okay? And when it does, it's really useful for us to think about the person's background. So I'm thinking about our background. So when something does go wrong, you know, really, and we'll talk about this more, thinking about, okay, how am I in conflict? And there is an instrument that I would do with certain clients, and it's called the TKI, the Thomas Kilmann instrument. And it's basically, okay, it sounds very formal, it's an instrument. It's a survey or a questionnaire, and it gives you great insight into your conflict style. So as your own who, as you think about you, you will have a natural style for conflict, okay? And that person, so let's say your employee who you're having a fight with or whatever's going down, and it can be anything, will have their own natural conflict style as well. And the Thomas Kilmann instrument tool questionnaire gives you an opportunity to answer loads of questions, and based on the questions, you get to see like which category of conflict style you fall into. So just to give you an idea about that, and you might have come across it before and you might not have, and of course I'm delighted to hear from anybody after today's call, and humanreasons.com is my website. But the typical styles we see, so what you see, so like even if you think about, let's say your family of origin, your family that you grew up with, you know, guaranteed in your family, you all had different ways of dealing with conflict. Or there were some differences. You weren't all exactly the same. So just in terms of conflict styles, you could have the avoidant style, okay, conflict avoidant. You can be conflict accommodating. So you're avoiding conflict avoidant. You can be conflict accommodating, where you just accommodate everything. It's like, yeah, no problem. Yeah, you can walk all over me. You can be conflict aggressive. So we know what that is. That's literally what it says. So very aggressive in conflict. And I would know people like that, and we all do. And I can be like that sometimes, depending on the person, and we'll talk about that again. So avoidant, accommodating, assertive, passive. So totally passive, like, oh, whatever. And that can be really annoying when you're dealing with somebody who's really passive in conflict, because you're looking for an answer lots of the time, or you're looking for a reply, and you're looking for the person to join in the drama, and they're like, whatever. And it's like, Urgh. And I think the last one is conflict assertive. And like with everything, I suppose, what are you looking for? You're looking to be more on the assertive side of things, so more of a balance where you're not going in on the aggressive side and Bob the Builder bulldozing the place down, whatever the bulldozer's name was in Bob the Builder, I can't remember. So not being aggressive and not being completely passive. Oh, you know, dorsal, we'd say dorsal, like collapse, just walk all over me, I don't care. Somewhere in the middle. And we'll talk about that more and more again. And I mentioned what I believe is a very relevant point, because I see it more and more. And I see it more and more in terms of me, because the more I go on this journey, the more I see that a lot of the time when it comes to conflict, it's me, you know, when it comes to certain situations. But what I do want to say about that is that we're different. Like, we'd have a conflict style, but we can flex that style depending on the environment we're in. So for Human Reasons, my company, from a very human perspective, I know for a fact I'll get away with certain things that I could say to my husband, you know, because he loves me unconditionally. But if I said that to an employer, like, or one of my clients, they'd say, good luck, Avril, you and your Human Reasons, I'm never going to work with you again. Who do you think you are? So depending on the environment as well, and depending on how safe we are, we'll bring more of, you know, of whatever to the fore. And I remember years ago, there was something going on with one of my children. And I said to, and of course I hit the panic button, and I spoke to a counsellor really, really quickly and said, what's going on with my son? He's shouting at me, he's doing da, 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 da. And she basically turned around and said, there's absolutely nothing going on with him. He just feels completely safe with you. And because of that, he's just dumping everything in your direction. So it was actually a positive reason, but I was getting all of the, obviously the output of that, which is part of parenting. And I just basically had to suck it up at that point in time. So it's really useful to think about that who. So who is the person? So what kind of style do they have? So, and even thinking about it beforehand, like how many, let's get real, right? How many of us put the time into thinking, right, you know, I'm after hiring Amy into my team. When, instead of if there is, when there is conflict between myself and Amy, how am I going to handle it? What way do I think Amy might be? Like what do I think? Do I think would she'd avoid it with me? Or do you think she'd really go after me and demand and be really aggressive and think that we started out? Do you think she'd be very passive? If you can think about it beforehand, it's really worthwhile. And even as an employee, thinking about it as well. So, you know, at the moment, okay, maybe you're working, maybe you're not working, but when you do go back to work, okay, when conflict happens, what will my style be? And as an employee, thinking about it again, as I said, in that 360 format. So if there's conflict with your boss, what way are you going to be? Like, because the stakes are different. Your boss gets to, like, a lot of the time, your livelihood might depend on your boss. You're probably going to be a lot more conservative around them. So if something goes down with my boss, how can I show up in that? Like, and we talk about that as well. Like, you know, because of the fact that, you know, the stakes are higher, I could lose my job. So I don't want to be walked over either. So I need to strike a balance between being professional and also not being walked over because I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. And how can I do that? You know, and it's really worthwhile putting some time into thinking about that beforehand. So it's like when it happens as opposed to if it happens, what am I going to do? So the next piece, and we'll talk about that more, and why. Like, why are we even bothering talking about this? I mean, we're talking about it because, well, firstly, if we look at the screen there, I mean, that's one of my slides of one of the American companies I've done some work from. Like, if we place any thought at all into handling conflict in a much better way, we're way more productive because you know for a fact, now I know for a fact, and I think based on my own, what we call subjective bias, I believe that you know for a fact that conflict can be the biggest waste of time ever. And like, so for example, if there's conflict in my personal life, it sucks the life out of me, literally. Like, I'm literally, it can sometimes. And if it's serious, I can be a shell of a person for days afterwards. And it probably wasn't needed. It probably wasn't needed. So it is really useful, as I said a while ago, to put some time into thinking about that who and why would we do it? Because life is so much easier, because there is a better way. Because as a great advisor of mine, her name is Sarah Devoy, as she always says to me, you know, what else is possible? And what else is possible is that in our fortunate human experience, because I suppose we are lucky to be alive, and we are, you know, wouldn't you love to be spending your time doing something much more constructive than dealing with a conflict situation? So again, I want to say as well, it's always back to that who and the why and what's going on, and like thinking about the person's background before today. And I've said that before as well. So today's the 19th of January, and actually it's one of my oldest friends' birthday today, Katie, and she lives in the UK and hasn't seen her family in forever and had a baby last year and couldn't travel back to Ireland, and like talk about conflict, you know, internal conflict, so much going on. But today is the 19th of January, right? And if you've conflict with someone today, it probably isn't about the 19th of January. Something has probably gone on in their life or their story beforehand that has influenced today. So always thinking about someone's background. It's always about kind of, okay, there's something's gone on now, but usually, you know, they talk about, well, what's your story? And it can sound quite Americanized, and that's okay. But it's like, well, actually, yeah, your story in life so far is it, because it determines how we show up. Because as we're rocking through the world, right, it's called our formative experience. So we're kind of forming along, and we're still forming all the way along, even though obviously as embryos, and, as we start off, embryology and stuff, we grow so, like, exponentially, so quickly. And then we grow very quickly in lots of ways in our first years of life. And then it slows down a bit. But we are still growing, and we are still being shaped by our experience. And I'm fascinated by learning. Like, learning is my favorite thing to do. So within the HR services I do, I love teaching. I love learning myself, because it's just good for my brain. And it re-energizes me, and I don't drive my family crazy then, giving out about something ridiculous, because I've learned something new and I'm obsessed with that new thing. But that whole learning experience that we're learning the whole time. So, like, from a learning theory perspective, we call that tacit learning. Like, we're like sponges, like we're picking up that formative learning all the time. So before today, so you've conflict with someone, and you're either the employer or the employee, and you're in hospitality, a really tough space at the moment, right up there next to any role in the clinical side of things, in my opinion. And I could be, I could get in trouble for saying that, but I absolutely think hospitality is such a critical and difficult role. And I just think it's a fantastic space as well in terms of learning, but I'll talk about that again. But just in terms of someone's experience in life so far is so formative. So it isn't really most of the time about what's gone on today. It's usually something in the past that's shown up again. And some of us, I spoke about this in the previous webinar, like, depending on how you've kind of gotten on in life so far or not. And depending on if you trust life and if you trust people, like, the whole show, for anybody interested in psychology, the whole show, and I really understand this because I've lived it, the whole show is about attachment. And attachment is basically, are you able to attach to another person? Are you able to essentially be in relationship with another person? Do you trust relationships? Do you trust people? And it's all anchored on trust, because if you're generally a person who more or less trusts people and kind of, look, it'll be fine, you'll be sort of okay in conflict. You'll probably be in the middle. You won't be in extremity. And I spoke about those extremities. But if you've had a really tough experience in life so far, where the world has kind of gone against you, your childhood was crap, school was difficult, you were bullied, work hasn't been hectic, you're hardly going to, like, it's quite likely that you're not going to trust people very, very well, and maybe you do, and if you do, wonderful, but it's quite likely that you won't, and very understandably so. And then you might be a person who's too trusting. So you either trust enough, we talk about, how much is enough or good enough. I think there's a book, for any of the parents out there. Is it the good enough mother or the good enough parent? So you trust the world enough, and enough is enough, right? You definitely don't trust the world, or you're too trusting, and too trusting is a problem as well. So depending on that, again, either for you as the person trying to resolve the conflict, as the employer, or the person in the middle of the conflict, really thinking about that again in terms of your own background. Okay, am I just nervous with conflict? Is this more about my stuff? Or is it something going on with the other person? Or what is it? It's just really, really helpful, insightful information. And what that's doing then is it is giving you something else to think about. It is broadening your lens, because as the American psychologist Tara Brach says, and she's awesome, right? If something's going on, whether it be addiction, whether it be a problem, whether it be an obsession, and I understand this because I'm not immune to these things myself. Our focus just gets completely tunneled into that one thing. So if there is conflict happening, we become like, there's the issue that happened, and then the next thing is our obsession with the issue that happened, or what can be obsession, and hopefully it isn't for you. And if it isn't, brilliant, rock on. If you're kind of like, oh yeah, that's grand, I'm getting on with my day, wonderful, I want to know your secret and please tell me what it is. So when you're thinking about those other, what we would call contextual factors, what you're doing really is you're widening out the lens. So you're giving your brain other input and other context, and you're thinking about different things. And like, a lot of the time with people we don't know, but we can guess. Say, look, I think kind of life has been crap for her, or no, I think she's okay, but it's different content as well, and we're not feeding the drama. And it's giving that newer part of the brain, it's the frontier, the prefrontal cortex, more interesting things to think about, and more context, and it's more settling, because neuroscientifically, and just in terms of our neuroscience, and by neuroscience, we basically mean the science of the brain and the nervous system. And really, from a neuroscience perspective, right, what happens in conflict for people, even if they try and stop it, is that the old part of our brain gets triggered really, really quickly. Really, really quickly. And that old part of our brain, as far as I know, is called the limbic system. So the limbic, L-I-M-B-I-C. So that limbic system. And in particular, something that's called the amygdala. I think it's A-M-Y-G-D-A-L-A. It's a tiny, tiny thing. As far as I know, it's literally the size of an almond, right? It is so, so small. It's like, tiny little piece, like tiny little circle. It's tiny, but what happens is in our system, because we know that through our evolutionary biology, we've had to stay on alert to survive. Because if we weren't alert in some way, we would have been eaten or something would have happened. So that means we still have that alert system in our brain. We've hung on to it because it serves, because as Darwin says, we hang on to what serves us. So it serves a function. It doesn't not serve a function. It does serve a function. And that's to keep us on alert, to protect us from harm. And that's the limbic system. It's like at the base of the skull, underneath there. And it's a limbic system. And as I said, it's the amygdala. What happens is that fires really, really quickly. And a lot of the time it'll fire, it'll activate. When I say it fires, it'll activate, it'll turn on and go, oh, danger. But what happens is, as far as I know, in terms of what I've learned in my journey, is that this can happen at the start very unconsciously. So we're not even aware of it. We're getting kind of, our system is coming to life and we're not even aware of it. And 3 seconds later, we're in the middle of an argument or we're storming up the stairs. And it's like, well, what's going on? And that's basically the old part of our system that is detected, that it thinks, and this is key differentiation, it thinks there's some sort of threat in the space. Now, sometimes it's right. There is a threat, but a lot of the time it's wrong. So what it's doing, and then it's signaling to the body, you know, there's a threat. And usually what happens then in our system, there's usually one of 3 responses. So this is what I've learned again, either fight the situation. So go in and fight, that aggressive response. So go in and fight, flight. So flight, think the flight of the Earls, you know, flight, just leave, take flight, go. So exit. So fight, flight. And the more newer response that's been discovered is called freeze. Also called the submit collapse response. It's like the dorsal response. Is the possum? There's one of those animals that fakes it's dead as a response, and that is to threat. That is the freeze response. So this limbic system will detect what it thinks might be a threat. It'll fire that warning to the body, and the body will either fight, flight, or freeze. And the start of that process undoubtedly is unconscious. And then it becomes conscious, okay? So it's it's lightning, it's faster than lightning. It's lightning fast, okay? So this is what happens. And there's a whole school of thought, and validated as well, called neuroception. And it's basically how the brain detects threat or not. And there's a lot of work being done on that. There's a lot of what the kind of helpful tools to be aware of in that space as well. So one of the key guys in that area in terms of neuroception is a man called Stephen Porges. And it's Stephen is Stephen, and his surname is Porges, Porges. He is the founder and validator of what's called polyvagal theory. But I think he coined the term neuroception. If he didn't, he definitely talks about it a lot. But it's all of the mammal system around detecting threat in the brain. So that very nicely brings us into, well, what now? So I know all this. So I've kind of thought about the who, someone's background. I've kind of thought about their style. I've thought about my style. I've thought about the fact that neuroscientifically, the brain will react really, really quickly. You know, I've thought about all this stuff. So what do I do? So essentially, there's loads you can do, right? But keep it very, very, very basic. The more basic, you know, Sesame Street simple. Again, I am definitely not an expert, but I am definitely somebody who comes across conflict. I come across it in terms of my work, in terms of advising employers, because it comes up all the time. I come across it in my HR work. I come across it in my career work. And of course, a lot of people, we prepare people for interviews, say, how do I answer that question? How do I deal with conflict at work? And we always say, keep it real. Let's prepare a real answer, because people want real people, and that depth and that realness to, okay, it did happen, but this is how we sorted it out. And you know, we talk about reflective practice, and this is fantastic. People are doing a lot of training at the moment. If you can do anything on reflective practice, like we experience in a situation, and then through reflective practice, you learn how to reflect on the situation as what we would call a critical learning incident, and then map out or specify the specific learning points within that incident or that scenario. And that's reflective practice. So like in that interview situation, believe me, the key thing that the employer wants to hear is, what did you learn for next time? You know, because guess what? You know, we all mess up. But the key thing is, what did you learn for next time? Because employers can smell artificiality. They can smell lies. They don't want to hear, oh yeah, it was all brilliant. Like, it's not. It doesn't work like that. But with tools like this, it can be a bit better. So what now? Essentially, as I said, keep it very, very simple. knowledge is power, always. I've always believed that, and it is. And every time I forget it, I get myself in loads of trouble, believe me. So that information I've spoken about in advance is really helpful. The now. So what now? The now is our key word there. Staying in the now, because what happens in situations that are difficult is the brain is the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of the brain is, okay, in the present, but also thinking about, well, she said that about me, which is in the past. And then thinking about, can I really work with her for another 2 weeks, thinking about the future? And what about this? And what about that? So trying to stay in the now as much as possible. And guess what? You won't stop the brain doing that, because that's what the brain does. It jumps around. But you can help it to kind of come, back into you. And by what you do to do that is you use the intelligence of your body, really, really simply. So you start connecting with the touch points in your environment. So you start feeling your feet in the ground. So connect with the now. You don't need to run to Easton's and buy a mindfulness book. All you need to do is start feeling your body. So even if you try it now, feel your feet in the ground. And I'm just kind of pushing my feet down because I'm not sure how much I'm in the body right now, because I'm in my head thinking about this presentation. And my husband has very kindly brought my kids out for a little drive, because otherwise there might have been a fight in the background, and I would be saying, right, okay, let's have a look at me refereeing conflict in action and how you don't do it, because the course at home is where I don't do it properly. But what now is try and stay in the now. Feel your body, okay? So feel your feet in the ground, feel your hands, your touch system, touch your hands. Like we say this to parents all the time. If your child is upset, try and touch them if you can, if they'll allow you to touch them. Make the eye contact. The touch system, the touch sensory system is absolutely one of our key senses, the touch system. The skin is the skin our biggest organ? It has to be, as far as I know, in my limited scientific knowledge. But touch is very calming. So it'll touch your body, but it'll also start calming down your nervous system, because through that fight, flight, or freeze, your autonomic nervous system is doing gymnastics in your system. It's jumping all over the place. And what you want to do is calm that down. So touch something, touch the wall, touch your head, touch your heart, touch the ground, punch the wall in a way that you don't hurt your hand, whatever it is, touch your body. So by doing that, then it kind of brings you really quickly in to the now. And the other thing you can start doing now, I will go with the body first. A lot of people might say check your breathing first, but sometimes when I feel anxious or upset, if I start noticing my breathing mightn't be great, and that makes me feel worse. So I usually find it more helpful to just kind of write, okay, what's going on in my body? Okay, I'm here. I'm 40 years old. It's the 19th of January. I'm alive. I'm not going to be killed by a zebra, even though I feel like I'm going to be. It's okay. And then if you can, notice your breathing. You don't need to do anything with your breathing. You literally just need to pay attention to it. So even try it there for a second. We just pay attention to our breathing for a couple of seconds. And then notice how you feel after that. That was literally a couple of seconds. And I know for me, it felt like a couple of hours. If you can do that, if you are somebody who can kind of notice your breathing for a while, give yourself a huge gift and give yourself at least 45 seconds, because we know this, again, to neuroscience and the work of Rick Hansen, that it takes the brain at least 45 seconds to register an experience. And 45 seconds is quite long. And I said this before, like I wear a digital watch, and we think 45 seconds is what we think it is, and what it is are two different things. It can feel quite long. So doing something like that is really, really helpful. So that's kind of stuff you can do with you, feeling your own body, noticing your own breathing, because you can do that anytime. You don't need to remember to have, lavender in your bag, or it's perfect How to Deal with Conflict book from Harvard in your suitcase. It's not that stuff. It's stuff you can do anytime, anywhere, no matter what's going on, no matter what's going down, no matter what you have with you, what you don't have with you, your phone, your this, your that. Who cares? You will always have you with you in some way. So you use you from that perspective, in terms of your body, touching the environment, touching your body, connect with the body. Somatic intelligence, the intelligence of the body would help you. And if you can notice your breathing, that's really, really helpful. The other thing, and I'm nearly finished now, but the other thing to say in terms of what you can do as well, what's incredibly important, or what can be incredibly powerful, is eye contact then with the person. Now, not everybody is comfortable with eye contact. And you'd see this, like I would know a lot of people in my own life that I know them most of my life, and Some of them they just don't do eye contact. Other people are very comfortable with eye contact. But for you, if you can make eye contact with somebody, it's a really calming thing. It's proven again through that polyvagal theory. Mammals need other mammals. And if we can be seen by another human being and we're like mirrors for each other, it can be very calming. At the start, it mightn't feel so great. If you're having conflict with someone and looking in their eyes, it's like, oh God, I'm not sure. But it can be really powerful, and it can be a real healer very, very, very quickly, so that can be really, really helpful from that perspective.
Just to jump in there on that, the whole conversation has been absolutely fascinating here. I'll let you look at me now as well, give you that treat as well.
Eye contact, thanks.
Watching the last 4 years in America, for example, the Trump debacle or whatever. I'm not getting into the politics of the situation, but there was one during the Black Lives Matter protest. There was obviously, there's so many stories that come out of it, different sides, etc., etc. But there was one African-American lady who was in a situation where she was holding a sign, and she had somebody, this big, huge man come up to her and start pointing at her and screaming at her and looking her up and down and, effing and blinding. And she said that the only thing she could do was remember what her mother, I think, told her, is that when you're in a situation, and she probably had the fight, the flight, and the freeze happening all at once. As you said, the system was turning cartwheels. But she said the only thing she would do is she remembered the bit of advice was to look him in the eyes constantly while he was screaming at her, because it humanized her.
Yeah.
Instead of being this thing or a point of anger and vitriol where your man was pouring this abuse at her, she looked him straight in the eyes and he calmed down.
Yeah.
He calmed down and he calmed down. In the end, he just shrugged his shoulders and walked off. Whereas if you meet conflict with conflict, it will invariably exacerbate the situation and move forward. Sarah made a point earlier on, sometimes conflict stems from different personality styles or a lack of self-awareness on how you are portrayed by others. Jamie has mentioned that he finds Headspace a great app for practicing your points, just about the breathing situation as well. I've had Headspace on my phone as well. Didn't use it for no other reason than once you get inside my head, it's hard to get out. But the tactile thing, for me, there's two words that sort of resonate with me with regards to conflict or any situation where you're instantly have that, because it's once you get into conflict, it's that shock to your system, first of all, that you're actually in conflict and you're like, oh. But focus and control for me are the two words that I used for myself. It's like control your breathing, which you were talking about earlier on, maybe not try and control your breathing, but to just be aware of it, which is a very, very powerful thing, to be aware of your own heartbeat and your own breathing. And to just find a point of calm. If you can imagine yourself, the storm is around you and just being a point of calm, try to remain calm, center it. Let everything else go mad while you take those precious moments to remain calm and suss the situation out in your own head. Yeah, that was my tuppence worth. I beg your pardon. So,
no, please. Absolutely. Input at any point. No, I agree completely. And just on the breathing as well. If you are somebody who can pay attention to your breathing, wonderful. And if you can take another step then in terms of breathing out longer than you breathe in. So we'll try it again. So breathe in for 2 and out for 4. So we'll just try that there. We'll do that ourselves. So breathing in for 2 and out for 4. So breathing in for 2 seconds, breathing out for 4 seconds. And we'll just do a couple of cycles of that to ourselves. So how does that feel? So again, that's another key tip for yourself or for kids at home struggling with homeschooling or anything going on with COVID. If you can breathe out longer than you can breathe in for a couple of cycles, it will really help you, because that kicks in the relaxation response in the body. It just tricks your physiology into more of a sense of calm, and that's really helpful. because as we know, babies are belly breathers. Like we're kind of meant to do diaphragmatic breathing, breathe into the belly, but we forget that. So our physiology just tightens up more and more as we go through life because we have more reasons to worry. And, you know, we just forget as well to breathe into the belly because we get to forget, because if we breathe into chest, that works too. So it's kind of faster as well, because chest breathing is a quicker, obviously it's shorter distance. So we get to do that. So if we get to take a shortcut, we're going to take a shortcut. But what's better for us? What else is possible? As Sarah Devoy says, what else is possible is if you can remember to breathe into your belly for a few cycles. Just feels so different. I just, you know, we all think they don't have a huge belly or what's going on in my stomach. It's like, just breathe into your belly if you can. If you can breathe out longer, again, while you're doing that belly breathing, that's really, really, really helpful. And it would help send more oxygen to your brain. I think the brain uses 95% of the oxygen we breathe. It needs a lot of our oxygen to work properly, you know, and a lot of people would experience like that brain fog, that sense of dissociation. On my head is very foggy, it's very fuzzy. That belly breathing is really, really helpful for that. Just one of the final things I'd say as well in terms of communication, the eye contact is critical. Critical. If you can do eye contact, awesome. If the other person can receive the eye contact, wonderful. And if that then starts to calm you both down, which is very likely to do, great again. Bearing in mind at the start, it's going to feel uncomfortable because we don't want to look people directly in the eye when there's conflict, but it will actually help and it can be very, very powerful. As we know as well, just to remind us before we finish, the work of Albert Meribane in the US, most of the communication we do is non-verbal. So it's not the words we say, it's how we say it. So our body language is fundamental. How we speak, you know, our tone, our pitch, our accent. So this is really critical. So at the moment, you know, from a work perspective, you could be interacting, you're probably going to be interacting most people in your life on a screen or on a tablet or on a device. If you can at all, have your camera on, because again, you're getting the benefit of the eye contact, both for you and for the other person. And be very, very aware of your body language, because again, a lot of body language is, we're not aware. So somebody said earlier, absolutely self-awareness is critical, or EQ, or emotional intelligence. If you can be aware of your body language, it's massively important. Like I know sometimes if something's going on for me, I'll automatically cross my hands. And by doing that, I'm closing the communication channel. So being aware of, most of the time, it's how we say something. It's our tone of voice. It's our pitch. It's our speed. You know, slow down. Give yourself a chance to slow down. It's all of that stuff, you know. Instead of saying, oh, I said all this to him, it didn't work. It's how you say it. It's how you say it, you know. And it's back to that, you know, people never forget how you made them feel, how you said something, what emotional response you said. It wasn't those words. It was how you delivered it. And if you go back and analyze the greatest communicators since the start of time, a lot of the time they didn't say the most amazing things. Like sometimes they did, of course, but it was kind of the way they delivered it, you know, in terms of their sentiment, in terms of their tone, being present, all the rest of that. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, and I'm just going to say from a final perspective, if there are any final questions or statements or comments, I'm very happy to take those. But again, my website is humanreasons.com, and I'd highly recommend that you log on and take a look. I'd love to hear from you.
Fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much, Avril.
You're welcome, Aidan.
Does anybody have any questions? Would anybody like to maybe even share an experience or anything like that? We have a few moments where we could. Blasted, I had a point, but I was listening so much I forgot to write it down. But
there's one thing I was going to say, actually. I was talking to my friend last week, and he had a fight with his girlfriend, you know, and so it was going down. So it wasn't a work call. It was like, I need you. And I was like, oh, what's going on at work? No, it's not work. It's with such and such. It's like, okay, what's happening? So we were talking away about it, and I was trying to listen to him. And I said to him, and let's just say his name was Mark. I said, Mark, when let's use Amy again. When Amy rings you, you're going to have to glue your hands to the phone, to the ground, not to answer, because everything in conflict's really, really fast. And he wasn't clear in what he was going to say. And I was like, do yourself a favor. Do what most of us don't do. Slow down. Because you know, if there's something going down, you're like, oh, give me the phone. It's like, just give yourself, like, you know, another colleague of mine, Helen Prendergast, who's done a number of webinars for you guys, she says power of pause, because it does work. Yeah. Because everything in conflict's really, really fast. I was like, look, let's get real again. Human reasons. When Amy rings you, you're going to want to answer straight away. Do not do that. Glue your hands to the ground.
It's gas. It's so true, and it's exactly as you said as well. Like your body reacts faster than you're actually conscious of aware. Like your reaction. it's like everything in life, no matter what we do, like especially with the conflict situation, is how you react to it as well. Very prevalent, a very, very real point that you made earlier on is that, like, forgive me, I can't remember how you phrased it exactly, but it was that moment of reflection, taking that time to reflect on things. So many, I'm fascinated by psychology and dealing with people and communication as well. From my own journey and obviously working in hospitality and customer service nearly all of my professional life, that effective communication, that ability to be able to reach through all these things, that other people's life literally meets you before you meet the actual person, if you know what I mean. You're carrying your attitude and your persona is an aura around you that touches things before you even get there sometimes, you know.
Totally. And by the way, you'd be a brilliant psychologist, so you should think about it. I think you'd have a lot to offer the space.
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's something I've been thinking about a lot, but it's particularly because effective communication, being able to articulate how we feel or what we feel or what's bugging us about something, is not something that everybody has or is able to do for no other reason than it's just not their thing. Do you know what I mean?
And then half the time, the step before that, not even knowing how we think or feel, not even because we're so busy.
Exactly.
So the step before that step.
Indeed, the ability to pause, to have that just nexus of just centeredness, like just being yourself in the middle of all of it, and taking those deep breaths will help you just your pause will actually help de-escalate the other side as well sometimes, because if you're actually sitting back and pausing, you're giving the other person, and maintaining eye contact, you're giving the other person the ability for them to calm down as well. Obviously, if that's the point of contact. William, I've always said this as a joke, there would be no conflict at work if we all wore mini cameras on our uniforms at work, when people know their behavior could be recorded, monitored, and they'd behave themselves a lot better.
And Aidan, that whole piece in relation to regulation, we do regulate each other, not sometimes, all the time. So that's what happens. So like with that eye contact, is that we are actually co-regulators, you know, so that's why they put, like, you know, premature twins together in the cot and this kind of thing, that we do co-regulate each other. So it might feel uncomfortable, but we do absolutely do that. So you're totally right in what you're saying.
I'm echoing your knowledge. That is all. It's fascinating. I mean, if anything, the last 4 years has shown us, you know, how readily we all are tuned, like, and social media has tuned us to be more outraged. All these articles just to get clicks, the clickbait, or they incite emotions in us that are the more primal or carnal, that you almost have a fight, flight, or freeze response when you're looking at something on a screen, when you're not even involved with people.
Yeah.
And that I've noticed it in myself. Like, I've actually had to watch my behavior on social media over the last couple of years with regards to how someone said something there, I don't like what you said. And then you sort of sit back, and then you're thinking about what you wrote on the couch afterwards, and you're like, why did I do that?
Yeah.
Why did I get involved or immerse myself in something that's completely out of, like, on the other side of the world in someone else's country, and I'm commenting on someone else? You know, you kind of sit down and you're like going, there needs to be a better way to do this. And, you know, it's Martin Luther King Day as well in the United States. And,
yes,
you know, you're not going to beat hate with hate. You're not going to beat conflict with conflict. It's all about the love. It's all about the communication, and it's all about finding each other in this mess that we have now.
But the two biggest frequencies in the world that we're told by the people who measure energy are love and fear. And it's that polarity, like they're the strongest frequencies that we have. So it's like at any point in time, any chance we have to join up and not self-destruct is really helpful. Yeah.
And it's, as well yourself, you never sure things, so you don't know what anyone else is going through. So try and be kind as much as you can, even if it means letting someone vent at you and just get their point of out and just out in the open. Having that moment of calm on your side has just diffused the situation already. Just like that. It's out in the open.
Exactly. I'd like to say, even as a final piece, I even see it sometimes with career work, the career support I give people. A lot of time there's too many choices and too many options, and that's overwhelming. And that can happen with conflict too. There's too many ways to contact someone or too many ways to reply, and that just adds layers of complexity to a situation. It's like, don't worry about contact, don't worry about all the email, don't worry about that. Just go back to being a human first for a couple of seconds, and the right answer will come eventually. Because we have too many ways to be in touch, too many ways to resolve, too many platforms, too many things, and even thinking about my grandmother, who's 87 years old, if something was going on in her life, let's say 50 years ago, she didn't have a phone or an email or an online chat to sort it out. She thought about it for a couple of days. Maybe if she had access to a phone, rang the person. And if not, it was the next time she saw them, maybe the following week, they sorted it out then in person and has proper time to calm down, that reflective practice, and that better response then when you do interact with the person.
It's two very, very good questions from Jamie and James. Now, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so we'll split them up into two. I'll ask Jamie's question first, and then I don't want to impinge on anyone else's time. Jamie has asked, what would be your advice if conflict goes too far to resolve, especially if it's a small team and two employees refuse to work with each other?
Yeah, just get support. Yeah, me too, loads of times. Get support. If it's a small company, if there's an internal HR, great. If there's an external person that advises you, great. If not, and if maybe there isn't, somewhere like workplace relations, get on the phone, off the record call. Don't give your name, don't give the company name. What support can you give me? Is there a mediation service? Is there something, and then when you feel comfortable with that, think about what you'd like to do next. Get support.
Absolutely. Yeah, find a common ground, mediation, and patience.
And mind yourself first.
Mind yourself as well. Don't get dragged involved into it too much, because that will tear you apart completely. James has asked how to tell the difference between conflict and bullying. Excellent. Yeah,
again, it's a very similar response. Get that support person or support process to support you in terms of differentiating that. Mm-hmm. Because again, that can be somebody's perception, because the whole show is perception. So it might be bullying, but it might not. And again, you will need support around that. That is a tricky situation. If you're an employer, there's loads of employer support. If you are an employee, you can talk to workplace relations as well. I also find citizens information fantastic. Yeah. And their live chat function is awesome.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Really good. I would just do either of those.
Fantastic. I think that's it. I don't think our loyal attendees have any more questions as of yet. It's been a fascinating topic. It's something you and I, we could probably talk for 8 or 9 hours, an entire day on it, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
This last hour has been brilliant. And I know, just speaking personally, and maybe for the people on there, well, I'm getting tongue-tied.
That's okay.
It's hugely beneficial just to have this hour, just to have someone like yourself, as an expert as yourself, and as forgive me, vulnerable as yourself, when you say, sometimes I have all this knowledge and I can't make myself out of this situation. And you can't, because you're human. Because sometimes conflict is inevitable. You can't get away from it. You just got to go through it. But it's that point of reflection that you were talking about. Taking time on a Friday, sitting down on your own, somewhere quiet for 5 or 10 minutes and just go through the week, what you did, how you did it. Could I have done this better? In this situation, could I have spoken to this person a little differently? All of these little things. And it just puts a little file in the back of your head, in your memory box, that if you do come up across a similar situation again in time, something in the back of your head will be able to go, oh, wait, hang on, let's react a little differently to this.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, I think this has been brilliant. I'm only sorry that it's ending now. I'm over time again. I'd like to say thank you to Avril on behalf of everybody here. A few people have mentioned great session, excellent, of course, and that has been. So Avril, I'm going to say goodbye to you, unfortunately. Everybody else, I'm going to say goodbye to you, unfortunately, as well. But hopefully I'll see you in the next couple of days this week and next week as well for some more valuable nuggets of knowledge, turning these lockdown friends upside down. We're going to make it. We're going to be okay. We really are.
Absolutely. Slán, míle buíochas.